September 8th, this day in history. Today we're going to go all the way back to 1504. Holy cow, that's a long time ago. On this day in 1504, Michelangelo's statue of David was unveiled to the public. One of the world's most beloved works of art, David, is a 17-foot tall, 12,000-pound marble masterpiece. And it was unveiled to the public in Florence, Italy's Piazza della Signoria. Carved from a single block of white Italian Carrara marble that had been rejected by other artists for being flawed, the massive statue depicts a nude David, the biblical hero who used a slingshot to slay the giant Goliath. Almost 400 years later, in 1873, David was moved indoors to the Galleria dell'Accademia to protect it from damage. Marble doesn't really weather that well outside. A replica remains in its place in the piazza. In 1664, New Amsterdam becomes New York. Dutch Governor Peter Stuyvesant surrenders New Amsterdam, the capital of New Netherland, to an English naval squadron under Colonel Richard Nicolls. Stuyvesant had hoped to resist the English, but he was an unpopular ruler, and his Dutch subjects refused to rally around him. Ouch, I hate it when that happens. Following its capture, New Amsterdam's name was changed to New York in honor of the Duke of York, who organized the mission. This story reminds me of a song by They Might Be Giants. The song is actually called Istanbul, but it mentions Old New York was once New Amsterdam. Check it out. Go find it on YouTube or Apple or wherever you listen to music and listen to it. It's kind of quirky and I enjoy it a lot. New York City is, of course, a place with a long and colorful history. I didn't know before I read this article that it became the first city in the colonies to receive a royal charter. And after the American Revolution, it was the first capital of the United States. I think I vaguely remember that from grade school. Anyway, you can find out more about all that in today's entry in Today in History for September 8th, link in the description. In 1781, a bloody battle began at Eutaw Springs, South Carolina. It's a little bit different Utah than the state of Utah. It's spelled E-U-T-A-W instead of U-T-A-H. Anyway, the Patriots approached in the early morning, forcing the British soldiers to abandon their uneaten breakfast in order to fight. I hate it when that happens. The Battle of Eutaw Springs was one of the hardest fought and bloodiest battles of the Revolution and proved to be the last major engagement of the war that took place in the South. In 1863, at the Second Battle of Sabine Pass, a small Confederate rebel force thwarted the Yankee invasion of Texas at the mouth of the Sabine River on the Texas-Louisiana border. That is a pretty interesting bit of Civil War news, and you can read more about this particular item at the entry on it at history.com, This Day in History. In 1900, one of the deadliest hurricanes in U.S. history hit Galveston, Texas on September 8, 1900, killing more than 6,000 people. The storm caused so much destruction on the Texas coast that reliable estimates of the number of victims was difficult to make, and some believe that as many as 12,000 perished, which would make it the most deadly day in American history. In 1915, a German Zeppelin commanded by Heinrich Matthey hit Aldersgate in central London, killing 22 people and causing 500,000 English pounds worth of damage. And that was a lot more money then than it is now, and it's a lot of money now. But of course we know that one of the pitfalls of the Zeppelin flying machines is that they're elevated by using highly flammable hydrogen gas. And eventually the British figured that out. Matthey was shot down a little over a year later and is buried in Staffordshire in a cemetery constructed for the burial of Germans killed on British soil during both World Wars. In 1935, Senator Huey Long was shot in the Louisiana State Capitol building. Mr. Long was a larger-than-life figure who boasted that he bought legislators like sacks of potatoes and shuffled them like decks of cards. He gave himself the nickname of Kingfish, saying, "I'm a small fish here in Washington, but I am the kingfish," to the folks down in Louisiana. Quite a character, Huey Long. In 1941, the siege of Leningrad begins. This 872-day siege of Leningrad cost an estimated 1 million Soviet lives, perhaps hundreds of thousands more. It was a terrible time for the Russians, and surely not that much fun for the German soldiers either. On this day in 1943, General Dwight Eisenhower publicly announced the surrender of Italy to the Allies. In 1945, American troops arrived in Korea to partition the country, almost exactly 1 month after Soviet troops had entered North Korea to begin their own occupation. Although the U.S. and Soviet occupations were supposed to be temporary, the division of Korea quickly became permanent, and so it is to this day. In 1954, SEATO was established. Having been directed by President Dwight D. Eisenhower to put together an alliance to contain any communist aggression in the free territories of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, or Southeast Asia in general, Secretary of State John Foster Dulles formed just such an agreement, establishing a military alliance that became the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, or SEATO, S-E-A-T-O, SEATO. In 1974, Ford pardons Nixon. Ford later defended this action before the House Judiciary Committee, explaining that he wanted to end the national divisions created by the Watergate scandal, which erupted after it was revealed that Nixon and his aides had engaged in illegal activities during his re-election campaign, and then attempted to cover up evidence of wrongdoing. Decades later, the John Kennedy Library Foundation presented its 2001 Profile in Courage Award to Gerald Ford for his 1974 pardon of Nixon. In pardoning Nixon, said the foundation, Ford placed his love of country ahead of his own political future and brought needed closure to the divisive Watergate affair. A lesson I think many of us could attend to these days. On this day in 1986, the Oprah Winfrey Show was broadcast nationally for the first time to huge success. Her daytime television talk show turned Ms. Winfrey into one of the most powerful and wealthy people in show business. In 2003, RIAA began suing individual sharers of copyrighted MP3 files. Carrie Sherman, president of the Recording Industry Association of America, RIAA, said, "We've been telling people for a long time that file sharing copyrighted music is illegal, that you are not anonymous when you do it, and that engaging in it can have real consequences." So there you have it, a wide variety of things that happened on this day in history over the span of almost 500 years. Give it a like if you enjoyed this content. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and feel free to share this video if you found it interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. That, my friends, is the difference between a sip and a gulp. After a sip, you don't go, Okay, watch your mouth curl. It was unveiled to the public in Florence, Italy's Piazza della Signoria, one more time. Didn't Cheech and Chong have a character in their comedy routine called One Mo Time? One Mo Time. Alrighty. Try it again. One Mo Time. Let's have another coffee here. Ah, the elixir of life. Italian as a second language. Michael, yeah, we're good. 1974, Ford. Okay, let's do that again. Oh my disc is almost full. Jeez, with the editing, criminy. Okay, we're gonna try that again. Really? Okay, hold on. Isn't that a cute coffee cup? I found it at Joann Fabric in the bargain basket. These are all pictures of patterns from 1970. See? Simplicity, 1970. Cute styles. I probably made and wore some outfits similar to this. Hold on, Mr. Mike, right there. Pretty good microphone. Just point it right at you and keep talking. I thought I was so smart for putting it in a notebook. On this, you're gonna get it sooner or later, I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure you can do this. Okay, I need to proofread these a little better before I print them. Ah, okay. You know, I dictate my notes, and sometimes the dictation thing, or Siri or whoever it is, doesn't quite understand what I said, and I don't catch these errors right away. So I'm gonna make some corrections and and try again. Sometimes my fella likes to use Siri to dictate text messages, and sometimes she doesn't understand what he says either. And so sometimes I get some very interesting text messages, like, what? But what I found is if I read them aloud, I can hear what he was trying to say, and it makes more sense. So let me just correct this right quick. The Istanbul was Constantinople. See, I've got that song stuck in my head.